Hare Krishna. So this session will be covering what are the main teachings that we'll find in Bhagavad Gita. As you all know, Bhagavad Gita has how many verses? 700 verses. And in an average, Srila Prabhupada book comes in about 1000 pages format. Yes, and sometimes we do struggle to remember all of this. In this session, we'll present the main things that we need to remember in order to understand what Bhagavad Gita is all about. As we all know, there are 3 sections in Bhagavad Gita. We've covered that in detail. Section 1, chapter 1 to 6, section 2, 7 to 12, and section 3, 13 to 18. And often Srila Prabhupada used to say that if we remember one word, one verse, one line, our life will be perfected. So that's the strategy we're going to use in this overview. One word for each section. So section 1 is all about you. That's the only word we need to remember. And this section is all about you. So let's start. First chapter, which talks about what? And you all remember, it talks about Arjuna's lamentation. What is the title of this chapter? Observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But the most important thing in that chapter is, at least from a philosophical point of view or context, is what happens after Arjuna observes the armies in the battlefield. What happens? Arjuna was lamenting. So the chapter 1 emphasizes the lamentation of Arjuna. So the word we need for this chapter is lamentation. Let's move to chapter 2. Chapter 2, Arjuna requested Krishna to explain the principles of life, higher principles of life. Chapter 2 title is what? Is the contents of Gita summarized. And what this chapter talks about the most is our identity. Arjuna gets a little confused and he said, okay, I'm a spirit soul, I'm not a body, however, you're asking me to fight, so what should I do? Then we move on to chapter 3, Karam Yoga. And the word we need to remember here is, what is your duty? Well, in common terms nowadays, we can say, what is your job? So then we have this chapter 4 now. Often Arjuna, after Arjuna gets to know or reminded by Krishna who he is, then Krishna tells him further what he needs to do. Then in chapter 4, the title is Transcendental Knowledge. What we need to know. So what's our duty? What we need to know. So the fourth word for the fourth chapter is know. So it's just like when we lose our identity card or a passport, and then we forgot due to amnesia or some conditioning, we forget who we are. What is our qualification? What we need to do. Chapter 2, 3 and 4 are like A, B, C of spiritual life. Now, chapter 5, a very interesting chapter. What is the title? Karam Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Well, title is very similar to 3, because 3 is also called Karam Yoga, right? But in Karam Yoga chapter 3, Krishna explains to Arjuna what he needs to do. Sacrifice, work for Krishna. In chapter 5, we will know what is the result of applying the chapter 2, 3 and 4. So chapter 2, 3 and 4 are like medicine of Bhagavad Gita, and 5 is the result. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, let's refer to verse number 29, where Krishna explains what is the result of Krishna consciousness. Or the first result of applying 2, 3 and 4 is what? Is peace. Remember we touched on the peace formula. You will obtain Shanti. Just as when you get your salary, like your paycheck, that is what we call like before and after chapter. Before chapter 1 is lamentation and 5 is result, your peace. And to conclude this section, we have chapter 6. What is the title? Dhyana Yoga. What does dhyana mean? Meditation. What does meditation mean? It is the heightened form of thinking. So here we have the Dhyana Yoga, the meditation that link us with the Supreme. Krishna is explaining to us that we need to think of here in order to achieve perfection. So the chapter 6 is all about thinking. So again, if you want to confirm that this chapter is about thinking, just need to read the last verse of the chapter. Krishna explained in that in order to achieve perfection, we need to think of Him. So in this way, we're just mentioning one example, one word, and sometimes we'll refer to one verse on the particular chapter. So the first section is all about you. So let's move on to the second section. Second section is all about Krishna. If you doubt what I'm saying, just analyze the title of the chapters. Chapter 7 is what? Knowledge of the Absolute. Who's the Absolute? Krishna. Chapter 8 is Attaining the Supreme. Who's the Supreme? Krishna. Chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge. About whom? Krishna. Chapter 10, the opulences of the Absolute. Who is the Absolute? Krishna. Chapter 11, the universal form. The different forms of Krishna will be presented in this particular chapter. And in the end, chapter 12 is devotional service. Again, devotion to Krishna. The first section has one example. That example is you. You're suffering from amnesia. You lost your mind. You lost your sense of consciousness. You don't know who you are. You don't know what is your job. You don't know what your qualification. You don't understand what is the result you're looking for in your life. And you have lost your sense of thinking. So this is an analogy from section 1. Now second section, we have a different example. And that example is a job interview. So many of you will easily relate to this particular comparison, right? In chapter 3, Krishna offers a job. Yagyartharth, a work for me. In chapter 3, verse number 9, Krishna says, and then give us, Krishna says, work for me, Krishna says. Chapter 3, verse 9, and then gives us back our memory, our identity, our ID card or passport. Now what's going to happen from chapter 7 to 12, or in this second section? Krishna is going to run a job interview. The first chapter of this section is all about Krishna being the boss. What is the title? The knowledge of the Absolute. So we all know the Absolute refers to Krishna and his energies. And that one word which we're going to learn for chapter 7 is boss. Now again, if you don't know what I'm saying, you can check the last verse. Verse number 30, where Krishna says, explains the reasons, like why he's the boss. Number 1, he's Adi Bhuta, he's the owner of everything. Number 2, he's Adi Deva, he's a controller of everything. Number 3, Adi Yagya, he's an enjoyer of everything. So these 3 reasons are given in the last verse of this chapter. Moving on, chapter 8. Attaining the Supreme. Remember, the analogy of this section is job interview. Krishna asks us, work for me. Chapter 7 is all about the boss who's taking the interview. Chapter 8, what is going to be your payment? When we go for a job, right? We want to know what is the salary, what are the terms and conditions. In chapter 8, Krishna wants to convince us, work for me. And what he does, he says, I'm going to give you something that nobody else gave you. We all have some kind of insurance, right? In chapter 8, Krishna gives us that life insurance, the eternal life insurance, the spiritual life insurance. Krishna says here, you work for me, and after you finish your work, or your working life it is called, I will take care of you. You will come to me. Antakale chamameva. So in the chapter 8, we have insurance. Now moving to chapter 9. This is the peak of the mountain of Bhagavad Gita, the most confidential subject matter in the whole book. And the title of this chapter is the most confidential knowledge. The analogy we give in this particular chapter is the password, right? We all have passwords. We have password for email account, bank account, Snapchat, Facebook. Krishna says, come and work for me. I'm the boss here. I'll give you this benefit. After all your work, you will come to me, no problem. And also, I also give you my password. I'm emphasizing or using this analogy because Krishna uses the word bhakti. Bhakti. 6-letter word, we all know it. We use it all the time. Bhakti is what opened the doors of Krishna, Krishna's world, Krishna's consciousness. Krishna explains, Bhakti mam abhigyanti. Without bhakti, you cannot know me. Patram pushpam phalam toyam. I'll accept even a simple offering of water, fruits, or flower if you offer with. So in this particular chapter, the most confidential knowledge is the love that Krishna has for his devotees. Now, chapter 10, what is the title? Opulences of the Absolute. Many things of how to remember Krishna in this particular chapter are explained, but I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to talk about the main opulences of the Lord. It is explained in the 4 verses, the essential verses of Bhagavad Gita, verse 8 to 11. You don't have time to read all 700 verses, at least read these 4 verses. Now in these 4 verses, there's something very special which is described. What is that? The opulences of Absolute are his devotees, his bhaktas. The first 2 verses talk about Krishna and the other 2 talks about devotees. The Krishna explains the main opulences, his most dear thing for him is the most confidential aspect of his relationship are his bhaktas. So in chapter 9, we remember one word which is bhakti, and in chapter 10, the word is bhaktas, the devotees. Now, chapter 11, very interesting chapter, right? Universal form, the movie we talked about. The boss has many companies everywhere, right? He's everything. His offices in major cities of the continents of the world. And he also has a localized form, the Narayan form, the formal, the official boss form. And the 4 arms, well-dressed form, armor, and things like Shank, Chak, Gada, and Padam. He's definitely the boss. But Krishna shows at the end of the chapter his personal form. What is his personal form? It explains in the 55th verse. Shama Sundar, the form with 2 hands playing the flute. The most intimate and primordial or ancient form of Krishna. So, chapter 11, we find the forms of the Lord. And in chapter 12, the final chapter of this section, we find here how to be the best worker. If you say in this context, Krishna explains how to be a dear devotee to him, a very dear devotee to him, and a very, very dear devotee of him. So he explains what we call KPIs. We all know what KPIs is, right? Key performance indicators. But in this context, we're going to say Krishna's prema indicators. Here we call it a manual or a contract. When you join an office, a company, generally you're getting an induction manual. This is what we have to do. All the fine prints are there, the criteria, the assessment, etc. So in chapter 12, called Devotional Service, Krishna is explaining how is that we have to perform that service so we get our reward accordingly. The reward is dear, very dear, or very, very dear devotees of the Lord. And the word we need to remember is the KPIs, the key premas indicators. Right, so the next section, the section 3. So we covered the first section. Remember the word is all about you. Middle section is all about Krishna. And then the last section is all about the connection between the two, which is yourself and Krishna. Now, where does this happen? Generally, the word we need to remember is, for this one is the prison house. And where is that prison house? this material world. But this connection happens in this material world. That's why Bhagavad Gita last section refers all to this material world. Now I'll explain how these different chapters present different teaching and how Krishna and the Jiva, you and I, are connected with him, but in this material world. So we have this chapter 13, one of the most philosophical chapter, and the title is the nature and joy and the consciousness. How can we explain this in few words, in few lines or sentence? So in chapter 13, basically, we want you to remember only one word. Let me give you an analogy. Job interview went successful and you got a job. In fact, just like Krishna offered the job to Arjuna in chapter 3, and in chapter 10, he accepted the terms and condition, he signed the contract. In chapter 13, what happens? We have a problem. Is that you got the job, but you're in jail. For some reason, one cause or the other, you ended up in jail. And thus you are limited, you're conditioned, you're imprisoned, and you cannot be free. Because of the body, because of the karma, because of our previous life, or all the criminal acts, we call it, you are in the prison house. So Krishna here gives us a very nice, a very magnanimous approach to help us. And what he does is that he offered to be our witness and our advocate. He can be our lawyer. And generally we say the Lord is in the heart. So that's the word we need to remember in this particular chapter, is the Paramatma, or the lawyer. And what does Paramatma do? Paramatma is constantly with you 24/7. And we say the Lord is in the heart. The line that we want you to remember is the lawyer in the heart. Lord is in the heart, lawyer in the heart. And he says in this chapter that he will protect you, he'll be your witness. You all remember the story of the two birds we already talked about, sitting in the same tree. One is a finite soul and once the finite soul turns to the Supreme Lord, then his path of liberation is guaranteed. So we have chapter 13. The word we need to remember is the Paramatma, or the lawyer in the heart. In chapter 14, you're in the prison. Generally, prison have bars. So Krishna explains the three modes of material nature. The bars of this prison house are made of these three elements: the mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. And in this chapter, Krishna gives us the tools and the means how can we cut these prison bars. Chapter 15, Krishna gives us a very clear plan. The escape plan, we rather call. How to be free from all these situations, all these prison environment we are. Chapter 15 is called the Yoga of the Supreme. And the one word we want to remember is the escape plan. Sometimes we hear the stories about the people. They have a plan where maybe you have seen Prison Break episodes, Michael Scofield character or something like that. And we have the stories where people have a plan, the gates and the towers and the exit routes and the pipes and all sorts of things. They make a tunnel and how to get out from there. So in the same way, Krishna in chapter 15 brings us the escape plan. And what is this escape plan? Is the Vedas. Yes, escape plan is the Vedas. We all remember Vedas, right? Right. Vedas, and in this chapter, and in this chapter 15, there is a very special verse number 15. It's very easy to remember. 15 is Vedascha sarva eham eva vedyo. I am the compiler of Vedas. I am to be known through the Vedas. So through Vedas, we can escape, right? So in a very simple way, we can remember the Vedas and the verse 15. So let's move on to chapter number 16. The title is Divine and Demonic Natures. Now remember, we're in the prison house. And what happens in the prison house? The lawyers generally recommend us don't hang out with the wrong crowd, wrong people. Why? Because your sentence could be extended. In the same way, if we hang out with the right people and we have a good behavior, then because of our behavior, our sentence could be reduced. So in this way, chapter 16 explained to us the different kind of people that we find in this world. And with those who we don't have to associate in order for us to be able to escape from the prison house and be let free. So we have one word, and that word is inmates. Remember the analogy, right? Prison house. So now, the chapter 17 is called Division of Faith. What does that mean? Because sometimes, because of our religiosity or spirituality or our piety, this material world starts to look like not too bad. We'll become very comfortable with the situation in the prison house. And the Krishna is encouraging us, regardless of what your situation is, you have to get out, right? So many things according to the modes are explained in this particular chapter. Different type of worship, different modes of renunciation and sacrifice, charity, etc. However, Krishna concludes in this chapter in the last 4 verses. He explains the 3-worded mantra, Om Tat Sat. The analogy we want to give this particular context is the simplest way to escape from the prison house is to have the key. So in this chapter, Krishna gives us the key. And that's the word I'm requesting you to remember, the key. And what is the key? What is the concept that opens the door of the prison house? It's the 3-worded mantra, the 3-syllable mantra that you will find in the last 4 verses of this particular chapter. And the mantra is Om Tat Sat. What does that mean? These 3 syllables contains a concept that's given in the Vedas, for us to be free, and basically means everything belongs to Krishna. Everything needs to be offered to Krishna. And the moment you do that, automatically you will become spiritualized. And your life becomes pure and you'll be able to get out. Now, Srila Prabhupada says, Bhagavad Gita finishes in 17 chapters, right? So the question is, why do we have the last chapter? So let's go back to our example. You're in the prison house. You try to contact your lawyer. Generally, lawyers are very expensive, but this lawyer is free of charge. However, let's just give an example that you cannot contact your lawyer one way or the other. You're not too good with the handiwork, and then the bars are not cut. For some reason, you're caught up. You don't know how to read a plan. You don't know about geometry or geography, and you're just confused. So the Vedas, you don't know where the north or south is. You are in trouble. The Vedic path is not for you somehow. And generally, what happens when your mother or father tells you you don't do anything? Don't do that, especially when you're little. You will end up doing exactly what they tell you not to do. So you hang out with the wrong crowd and your sentence could get extended. So nothing is working, and then you go for Om Tat Sat. I don't know Sanskrit, I don't know Yagyas, I'm not Vedic, I forgot all these things. I don't know how the key works. Everything sorts becoming very dark, very negative, and you get stuck, right? So the last chapter is the lawyer coming into your rescue. He's telling you the simple way. All you need to do is, and that's the common word, very, very known verse of the Bhagavad Gita. This is the essence of Bhagavad Gita presented in the verse 66 of 18th chapter. Just forget all the dharmas. Just forget everything else. Just surrender unto me. And if nothing else worked, just hold on to Krishna's instruction, guidance, lotus feet, and you can be free. So Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vaja. Just remember, just surrender unto me and let's go out. Let's go out. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo. All the crimes that you have committed and the reason why you're here, you will be cleared. Don't doubt it. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha sami ma sucha. Moksha means freedom. So he's offering us, if we surrendered, if we just continue to follow what Krishna is instructing you, then you will attain moksha, liberation, and the path of devotional service is open to you. So in this way, we've finished the 3 sections of Bhagavad Gita. Shall we have a quick recap? Let's do it. So first section is all about you. The second section is all about Krishna, and the third section is all about prison house. The first section utilizes the analogy of amnesia. You have forgotten, like when you lost the passport, the ID card, who you are, what you do, what you know, and then also explained what is the result of knowing who you are, knowing what you need to do, and what you need to know. Peace, the first step to achieve eternal happiness. And then explains what's the thinking process required to achieve perfection. In the middle section, we have everything about Krishna, why he's called Supreme, the boss, why he's called Absolute, the owner of everything, the controller of everything, and the enjoyer of everything. And what Krishna gives you as exchange, what they say as a reward for the job he has offered you and you're about to take. What is the password, the most intimate confidential knowledge for devotees and for those who work for him, serving in love and devotion. Bhakti, that's a word. Chapter 10 called Opulences of the Absolute. Not all these mountains, not all these rivers and oceans and different opulences of the world is explained in this chapter, but his most dear opulences, which are that bhaktas, presented in the 4 essential verses in chapter 10 called Chatushloki. And chapter 11, the 3 forms of Krishna was explained, universal, Narayan and Shama Sundar form. The last one, the manual or the KPIs, the Krishna Prema indicators, how to become the most dear devotee of Krishna. And then the last one, the prison house. Chapter 13 to 18, Krishna is acting as a lawyer, sign up the contract in chapter 10, and now like what Arjuna did, but you are in jail, but you cannot go to work. So Krishna says, I will protect you, I'll be with you, I'll be your witness, I'll stand for you until you get out of the world. Chapter 14, 3 bars, how to cut its modes of nature and be free. Chapter 15, he gives us the escape plan, which are the Vedas. In chapter 16, whom we have to associate it with, what is the nature of what we have to reject in order for us to be freed from the sentence that we have given. 17, the simple way, is Om Tat Sat. It's all about yajna, it's all about sacrifice. So when you perform the word that Krishna refers to in chapter 3, so when you perform the word that Krishna refers to in chapter 3, the general word that yajna uses is Om Tat Sat, meaning everything belongs to Krishna, thus everything needs to be offered to Krishna. That's the simple key to open this prison house. And in chapter 18, when everything fails, just surrender unto Krishna. Krishna will take you out. So in this way, very simple, summarized, very succinct way, we presented this Bhagavad Gita. And this is for you to have a clear context of what all the text, all the chapter, and remember one word, each of the sections, and for each of the chapter. And this is it mainly. That's our overview. And just before we finish, remember this is not the end. This is just the beginning of our spiritual journey. And I would like to remind you, we'll continue with Hanuman Chalisa from 27th of April 2025 onwards in our Gurukul class at Slough Hindu Temple. And also we will go through Bhagavad Gita again, a batch number 5, sometime after summer. Hare Krishna.